somebody keep them. Christine's going to scribe. I'm Dan Albrecht from CCRPC. Christine's going to scribe here. But again, what we're going to, and so just let's keep track of, who wants to be a timekeeper?
7:30 we got to be out?
We got 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15, and then 10, so we got to move. So,
What do you need?
what's that?
What do you need for time?
This is what's going to happen. First 15 minutes, introductions. Again, try to speak as a delegation. Tell us who is here from your town. Quick overview of the impacts your town experienced in the 2023-2024 flooding events. So let's start at the mouth of the river and work our way up. So you're representing the entire municipality of Colchester. So introduce yourself and talk a little bit about 2023 and 2024 for Colchester.
I'll be very easy to follow. My name is Kathy LaRose. I'm the Planning and Zoning Director for the Town of Colchester. We also administer a CRS for the town. But very easy to report out for 2023 and 2024. We had very, very minor flooding impacts. So when I say minor, I mean probably 2 to 3 properties that were impacted, inconvenienced for a couple of hours. Less than a day.
Some of this, the
So
farm up
please don't throw anything at me.
the farms in the lowland area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pine Island.
Yeah,
Right, Christmas tree there, you probably know.
that,
Fed it to a goat.
right. The goat farm right there.
Yeah. Sorry? Oh, the community rating system. So members who are part of the CRS get, their people who live in a floodplain get a discount on their flood insurance premiums.
Yep.
So folks in Colchester get a 10% discount. You can get more than that. But Colchester residents in the floodplain get a 10% discount on their flood insurance premiums.
Yeah. Based upon a town qualifying that they've got good zoning, they do good outreach, good record keeping, elevation certificates, all those goodies. Great, so that was Colchester. So let's move slightly up river to Winooski.
Yep, I'm the city manager at Lane Long. 2023, it was minor both times, probably because everything went into most of the water went into two wetland areas that are conserved land. So whoever decided that in Winooski back in the day, they did the right thing. We had to do some hardening at the wastewater treatment plant, which is the one property that's in floodplain of course, and looking for some grant money to help with that. But you know, we rebuilt it in 2013 and made it higher, so that's why it was mostly protected this time around.
Okay. Good
Should add
stuff.
that most of our floodplain properties are not in the river, they're at the lake.
Yep, good point, exactly. Right, good.
Matt Wallace, Shelburne Town Manager. Similar stories, negligible impacts, pretty high level of capacity to plan ahead. Wastewater treatment plants had high flows, but no failures.
I know.
They're working up the river.
Working up the river.
You got
Starting at the
this.
lake.
I actually didn't know that I was in the Winooski River watershed. Christine told me where the pond goes. It's only a small portion.
Big Shelburne Pond, that's right, exactly, yeah. Glad to be here. All right, moving up, Essex. Show my bad knowledge of the river, but who's next? Move up. Who wants to claim?
It's Essex, but yeah.
Yeah, Essex, all right.
We're aware of that because they're
Richmond? Richmond, okay. Who's here from Richmond? And speak as one.
Okay, I'm Josh Arneson, Town Manager. I guess I'll speak for us. This is David Sander, our Select Board Chair, and Tyler Bayshire, our Zoning Administrator. So in 23, we basically had 2 floods. One was the Winooski River flooding, and that was midweek. That inundated a lot of properties along the Winooski River. That was probably the most impact to residents in 23. A lot of water in basements, I think some first floor as well. Through the town, we had Volunteers Green got pretty well inundated. That's our main park in town. But as far as road damage in the first flood in 23, not a lot of municipal road damage. However, 4 days later, we had torrential downpours on a Sunday afternoon. That created a lot of flooding on the tributaries, and that's where we lost a lot of roads. I think it was about $1 million probably in damage to the roads on that one. Lots of culverts, lots of ditches eroding. Yeah, it was very, very fast. It was 2 15-minute downpours basically of like 3 or 4 inches each. It was crazy. 2024 was a flood that came, both Winooski River came up, and the tributaries all at the same time, all the same night. So again, Winooski River did a decent amount to the volunteer screen, to homes, but then in this one, we saw significantly more damage along the tributaries and the side roads, because they're all pretty steep. There's a large watershed that flows in all of these and takes a tremendous amount of water funneling straight through basically sort of a small canyon. So tons of road damage. We got about $1.9 million in total costs for '24. And also a lot more impacted homes with this one, both along the Winooski as well as where those small tributaries end. Then the water would sort of spill out and really inundated a lot of homes along some of these side tributaries. We've got about a dozen homes, I think, that are interested in moving through the buyout program. And at least one or two that's interested in the elevation program. We had 3 of those were from the '23 storm, but a lot of people after '24 were like, we're done, we gotta do something.
Great.
All of those flooding events were very different.
Yeah.
Erosion, flooding, mucking,
Crazy, yeah. Okay.
even the areas that flooded were very different.
Yeah.
Let's hop quickly back downstream to Williston.
Yep, Christine Doherty, Assistant Director of Public Works for Town of Williston. I'm here with Lisa Cicchetti, our Stormwater Coordinator. Kind of similar to what you guys were just sharing, is I think multiple events between 2023 and 2024, but as we know them as the 2 major events, multiple roads flooded out, culverts washed out, roads damaged as a result, had to rebuild one of the dirt roads both in 2023 and in 2024, same section, ironically, which is washed out before. So we are pursuing hazard mitigation funding to try to address that. Was able to work with the UVM engineering students who actually came up with some great design for us as part of their capstone project. So we were able to kind of help with community engagement with that as well. So I'm excited about that, and we'll be looking to implement that over next year. But we see patterns in both events, roads that were impacted by flooding and just general washout. So.
Okay, Huntington?
Yeah, I'm Adam Argo, Town Administrator, and I'm here with Landell Cochran and Dory Barton, Vice Chair and Chair of the Select Board. I wasn't in Huntington in 2023, but I don't believe there was much that affected us from that storm, surprisingly. In 2024, this most recent one in July, we had sort of like 2, kind of like Josh was saying, 2 main avenues of damage. One being like flash flooding coming from tributaries down the steep slopes, which took out culverts, roads, sections of road. I know some private roads were like completely washed out so that people didn't have like access to their homes or emergency access. And then there was just the Huntington River itself rising, cresting above its banks, and that took out farm fields, more roads and whatnot, and bridges. But also, like, some houses were severely affected. Like, one house was swept like 50 feet off its foundation, and there are a handful of houses that got really nailed from that river cresting above. And so we have like somewhere between 12 and 15 buyouts that are actively pursuing. Yeah.
Okay, all right. What else we got here? What town we got? Bolton? Bolton, there we go.
Yep. 2023.
What's your name, sir?
Sorry, Mike Etisara, I'm on the select board.
Great.
2023 was mainly flooding along the Route 2 corridor. Several homes were flooded. That wasn't too bad. This year's flooding, though, again, along the Route 2 corridor, houses getting flooded again, but also, as in Richmond and Huntington, we had water coming down the tributaries, down the mountain slopes, really steep roads. The Bolton Valley Access Road, which is paved, was severely damaged. The Knox Road, which comes down from West Bolton, is a dirt road. It was severely damaged. We had some other culvert damage and some other houses flooded in West Bolton. We're looking at somewhere around $3 million worth of damage. We did get a loan from the state for $1 million, and we're looking at a bond for the the rest of the repair work.
And just to put that into context, what's your municipal budget?
Yeah.
Under 2 million, just under this year.
Great. Okay, have we got anybody else here who wants to chime in with their town experience now? All right, so thanks for that. So the next prompt is, what are you working on right now? What do you hope to do in your community moving forward with increasing adaptation and reducing future flood impacts? So let's just sort of go, whoever wants to go, and, you know, again, what are you guys working on? What are you guys thinking about?
Sure, I'll jump in again, Josh from Richmond. So we've got a few things we're working on. We have 2 emergency watershed protection program projects that qualified for the 23 storm that we're working on engineering for right now. Those are projects that primarily work on bank erosion where it's going to threaten a structure, a lot of these private structures. We have another, I think, 10 or 12 sites that were approved after the 24 storm, so we're just in the early stages of those, but those are some mitigation things we're working on for private homeowners. As I mentioned, I think we've got about a dozen folks in the buyout program, a couple others who are interested in the elevation program, but they're really funding the buyout programs first, it seems like. So that's sort of where people are going, and a lot of people who are interested in the elevation are trying to switch it over to buyout, because I think there's fatigue. People are sort of so that, I guess, helps to kind of get structures either elevated or out of the floodplain. Whenever we do go out and replace damaged roads, culverts, a lot of times we'll upsize, we'll go up at least one size on the culvert. It's sort of been our road performance policy for many years to do that. So we're trying to reinforce and get the infrastructure built back better storm line pitching as we go through that. We've got a couple of larger culverts that we're going to probably be looking to do mitigation for to see can we get, I mean, these are like really big 4-foot, 5-foot culverts, so we're going to try to, we can't just go up one size, so we can't do FEMA. So we're going to try to go through some of those with some larger mitigation projects and submit those. We also are starting a flood mitigation study, which is through the FEMA mitigation grant funding that came through. We just had to kick off waiting for that last night with the engineers.
This is the advanced assistance?
This is the advanced assistance,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. So they're looking at the entire stretch of the Winooski throughout town, as well as upstream on the Winooski, and then 3 tributaries, the Huntington, Jonesville Brook, and Snipe Island Brook. They'll be looking at all of those, because all of those suffered, severe flooding, flash flooding, but also contributed to the Winooski River flooding. What am I forgetting?
There's the interstate Route 2 bisect.
Oh, yeah, sewage treatment plant that got impacted both floods, and we're looking at, so we're in our 20-year upgrade to that plant. So as part of that, we're looking at flood mitigation. We have a pump station that's located on one side of the bridge, and it pumps sewage up underneath the bridge back to the sewage treatment plant. All of it's in the floodplain. All of it gets under water. Well, the sewage treatment plant luckily stays above water by a foot or two.
But it's surrounded.
But it's an island. It is an island.
Floodway entirely surrounded.
The pipe underneath the bridge got impacted, I think, in all 3 storms, and had to be, every time you try to straighten it out, it's like $50,000 for the scaffolding. So part of the engineer's charge is what can we do for flood mitigation for that pump station and for the infrastructure that travels underneath the bridge.
The pipe was put under the bridge in 1969, and it's been fine, but we've had to fix it 3 times in the last 2 years.
Lord.
Basic question.
Yeah.
So the buyouts, is there like an estimated amount of acres that then could become floodplain?
It depends on each individual property, right? So once it goes through the
They're not like
buyout.
contiguous?
No, they're not, yeah, it's sort of, yeah, I mean, there's like 3 or 4 on one street, Esplanade in particular. But yeah, it's sort of at the owner's discretion who wants to get a buyout. So I don't know, that's a good question. I don't know how many acres are going to be sort of restored, because at that point, they take the structures away and it becomes open space.
But you'll have structures remaining on that street, so
Oh, yeah.
it's more like missing teeth.
That's a good way to put it. It's probably a quarter to a third of the structures on that street would be buyouts.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but buyouts are a hard decision for people. It is, it helps, and we'll see what comes in the coming years. I mean, it's really hard. We talk to these folks about the buyout, like, it's been their home for 20, 30 years sometimes, and it's like heartbreaking for them to give that up. But a lot of them are coming to that conclusion that they can't deal with the stress anymore.
Most of these buildings survived the 27th flood in Irene, and have been flooded 3 times.
Huntington, I know you guys are working on some similar ideas.
Yeah, a lot of similar stuff. Although I feel like we're a year behind on a lot of stuff compared to Richmond, maybe because we weren't affected in '23. But I've been, asking Josh for help, and it's been great. He's been able to help me, and I've actually worked with you, Dan, and we're doing that advanced assistance application now, and that's probably the largest project we have in sense of its scope, and that it's this scoping study that's going to look at the Huntington River and at least one of its tributaries, the Texas Hill Brook, and try to collect some data and analyze the river and figure out, try to do like some hydraulic study and some sediment study, and just figure out if there is anything that can be done to lower flood levels, because it may be that certain, dropping flood levels, maybe that is something that's possible, and maybe that could go a long ways to helping town infrastructure and public property. I don't know, or maybe it's not, right? And then what's left is buyouts, which we have 5, I know, that have just sort of wrapped up over the last few years, and we have, like I said before, another 12 or 15 that are, interested in the works. And then, so you buy out the property, and then maybe it becomes a flood plain in the future. But it is tough because they're often not continuous. You often will have a homeowner who's like, we're going to stick it out, which kind of makes it hard to turn that into a floodplain. And then we have the upsizing, a few culverts upsizing, and we had one really large culvert on the Texas Hill Brook. Absolutely annihilated, and that we are hoping to turn into a bridge, so that would be our largest FEMA project.
Gotcha. Okay. And just to clarify on this, we've been, just kind of serving as a sounding board a little bit. Advanced assistance grants. So there's the big HMGP list, which many of you put. Christine was sending out emails to you guys saying, hey, put in your, and so the state started culling that list a little bit. And a lot of the ones they really prioritize were the buyouts. They really want to get as many of those as possible. The advanced assistance is something, get it now, so you can do some of the study work to identify projects, and then November 2025, there'll be a due date then. So the idea is that you've already secured an engineer to help do your study. Hopefully they'll be underway in a couple of months as well too, and then queue things up for preliminary designs of a couple of projects, cost estimates, then get the HMGP, November 2025, maybe the grant gets awarded spring 2026, but it's all about
Getting closer to shovel ready.
right, and keep pushing the ball down the court so you can have a nice, great photo and ribbon cutting in a couple of years. So, go ahead.
When, I'm in Shelburne again. When Julie Moore put up that picture of the vulnerable communities to armor and the wilderness areas to let the river run wild, and then the upland areas to develop in, Shelburne has a lot of that third category. So our planning commission and select board have been thinking a lot about the opportunity and responsibility to host more development. That the state population needs to grow, we have housing needs, we have Route 7 infrastructure capacity and high and dry ground. So a major project underway now is the zoning bylaw update, which was in place before state housing reform. Those mandates have kind of given it a kick in the pants and some further support. So larger buildings, new residents, and if you can't build in some other parts of the state, maybe you build here instead.
That would be a big deal for Shelburne. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot as both a zoning administrator, and I live about 40 minutes away from where I work. I live in Morrisville, I grew up in Cambridge, so I'm kind of from Moyle County. But that's something I think about, just, both from a professional kind of academic standpoint, is that, thinking of a town like Bolton, which you had more damage, incurred this year than when you have a municipal budget. You're not the only town that's gone through that. We have to think about, is a town like Bolton going to exist in 10 or 50 years from now if they can't afford to keep paying to maintain infrastructure, given an aging population, use housing stock? There's something to bear in mind is, are we going to have Bolton as we know it 10 years from now, or Richmond for that matter, or wherever? Because, you you can't afford to keep, you know, paying to fix everything. That's,
Yeah.
that becomes, you know, that coupled with all the other cost drivers in the state, you know, it might be, it's gonna engender a lot of very tough conversations, I think.
I saw that happen in my previous gig in Virginia. I managed a town that had a levee system that was a pork barrel project in the 80s. And the next town downriver didn't have such a well-connected congressman and didn't get a levy. And that town disincorporated. There's a process to give up the charter. The population declined, the buildings got abandoned, and people moved uphill. And the one town was worth protecting, and the other wasn't. And it was pretty heartbreaking for the residents when they gave up the charter, but the town wasn't a going concern anymore. And so it really does matter where you invest in the infrastructure, that the levee was the life of that town, and our neighbor didn't have it.
Yeah.
The affordable housing crisis is in play in Richmond as well for the last 20 years or so. It's sort of been in the background. This is a problem, this is a problem. But developable land in Richmond is so limited, especially with flooding. It's really boiled over the last couple of years. It's, hey, we need housing, we need housing. There's no place to go.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things too, I mean, we might have, again, as a zoning administrator, I don't write, you know, I don't write plans, I administer it, but I look at it as from, you know, from an administrative standpoint and other things, it's like, it's not necessarily, you know, the amount of resources we take to do effective flood planning are serious, you know, and it's, you know, it's not that we need more programs, it's that we have to be able to staff and resources to kind of do what it is that we're trying to do, you know. Having more programs that Josh or somebody else has to fill out paperwork for, to apply with, you know, isn't what you need. Like you said, you need the bodies to actually
Yeah,
do.
well, that's a good point. It brings us a little bit into our next prompt, because you said needs right there. And you said, I think I need another staff person. So thinking about this next prompt, unless somebody wants to really talk about a project anybody got a project they're doing. I know you're working eventually, hopefully, to get a grant at HMGP, right, on the sewer plant, and everybody's got buyouts into Stephanie Smith. Everybody's got their big list. She's got the giant list for the whole state. But this next question, so to do the work you've talked about, we got the upsizing culverts, bridges, zoning rewrites. You know, to do that work and thinking about resiliency, what are your needs? You know, immediate needs, midterm needs. What are the gaps? What are the obstacles you're confronting right now? As you
I have two what probably sound like minor things in the face of these challenges, but they're very critical to Winooski. So during the 23 floods, the Essex gauge was broken during the time when we needed to know when it was going to crest. So, and that was very stressful. I'm like having a reaction just thinking about it. So I've been trying to figure out, like, I mean, it's the USGS,
right.
but it's like, what happened? What does it take to keep that going? Because you know, there are certain things that we can do to prepare, and we know how long it takes to get to crest, from the crest in Essex to come down to Winooski, and at what level it's like, okay, we gotta do things. But we didn't know when that was because it wasn't working. It was
Not one of those are great.
horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I thought it had crested for about an hour or two because it went level, but then I was like, oh no, it's just broken.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
Okay.
The other thing is better forecasting. So our fire chief happens to have a relative that works at GMP and high up somewhere. And so when we were looking at the forecast from from the NWS, it was like, oh, they're projecting for cresting at this time. It's like, it's past that time and it's still going up. So he called his relative and they talked to they have their own forecasters there, and their forecast was correct. So what is happening there? How do we react when it's happening if we're getting bad data?
The next follow-up meeting is for all the towns to get in the room with all the dam operators and start thinking about information. And I know it's been talked about.
Yeah, I would second what Elaine's saying about forecasting, because I feel like in all three floods, there was things that could be done better, and I try to take a 30,000-foot view for the forecasters. I mean, a lot of this is new, right? Like we're seeing incredibly different weather patterns, way more moisture. So I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're doing the best they can with the models they have. But those models, I think, are probably changing. But I don't think that anybody really knew we were getting those downpours on the Sunday in 2023. You might have, in 2023. And then December, I remember calling the weather service in Burlington saying, hey, I see the forecast. It looks like we're going to get away here in Richmond, but if you factor it in, there's 2 feet of snow in the mountains. Oh, yeah, we factored that in. I'm like, okay, because there's a lot of water in the mountains.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it flooded. And in 24, I remember being on the call, the emergency update call, at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're like, oh, maybe some minor river flooding in Richmond. And I'm like, I think we'll be all right. Now, that said, we still battened down the hatches. Water, sewer battened down, volunteers green. We did everything we could to. So it wasn't like, we're like, well, maybe. But that night, even by 9 o'clock, I remember I was like going to bed. Like, yeah, I guess we're good. And then my phone started blowing up. But yeah, it was that way.
Yeah,
I
Steve.
think, I think, so we do a lot of stormwater mitigation work, so I brought the stormwater coordinator with us. We're a MS4 permitted community, so we have to do a lot of requirements for that. One of the challenges that we continually run into, though, as we talk about land and developable land and the clash of developable land and the open spaces that we have to keep under our administrative rules or zoning rules, is we run into a lot of wetlands. I mean, which have obviously a very valuable ecological resource, hydrologic water or soils, right? But we are also not allowed to do any stormwater mitigation, ponds, work within those spaces. So getting the buy-in by communities, asking a community member to give up developable land to put in stormwater infrastructure is really, it's almost impossible. I can't blame them for not wanting to when they have 20 to 30 acres of wetlands that are preventing them from developing, but yet we can't utilize that and work within that space to take better advantage of it.
Yeah, you can't put the outfall in there, or
And it's really,
or adjacent to it.
or adjacent and the buffers around it, and I understand there's the ecological values to those, but we also have to have some place to put the water. And we continue to say that. The other thing, part two, real quick, is education and outreach to the citizens, just really helping them understand the level of service that the municipalities can provide. And we got a great staff, highway crew that are out there. They know all the hot spots. They check for logs, they check for vegetation. But the community, the residents themselves, their little roadside culvert ditch, they don't think about it. Shoot, they'll put stuff in it, right? They dump their leaf debris and stuff in it. And so they, at the residential level, just the knowledge, the education, and the proactiveness there. Take the stuff, you see stuff's in the culvert, you know when rain's coming, go check it, clean it out.
Yeah,
we will help when we can, but we also have 80 miles of roads to pay attention to. We can't.
Well, and you've also got to make the distinction.
out.
I talked to many of you over the summer, Christine and I, and Taylor and Darren and others in our office. All these people calling you and going, "Hey, fix this," and you're like, "You're on a private road, like."
Right.
And remember, so you need to put a sign next to the private roads, "Here be dragons," like, you're on your own,
So just to summarize it, I think there's education to the residents and getting them to be proactive and understanding that they can really make a big difference. That we provide as much level of service as we can, but we have limited capacities within that. And then just, some leniency, some flexibility at the state level for wetlands.
Yeah, good point. Tyler, you're on.
I was gonna say, on the challenging side, Tyler started to touch on it as far as staffing. We ended up hiring a temporary staff person because we had so many elevation buyouts, the WP program to manage, and it just became so much. We had to hire somebody else to do that. Plus, my main assistant, he was getting so many hours for just FEMA response, right? Trying to get all the data gathered from the 23 storm for FEMA response, and then knowing we had the 24 storm on the horizon as well. So just the sheer time to do all this stuff, and it's great that the state helps out with the buyout programs. They really take a lot of the administrative burden away, but there's still some on the town. If they could do the same with elevation, that would be awesome, because that'd be way more burdensome on the town staff. And then funding, you know, as I look at some of these larger projects, there's, I'd say there's probably, peak, probably maybe 10 culverts in town that we could upsize and reinforce, but they're hundreds of thousands of dollars per project. And, you know, which one do you choose to go through first, knowing it's gonna take a year or two to get the money?
Just to follow up on that, right now, everybody in this room here is getting ready to finalize their budgets to get ready for town meeting day.
Yeah.
How many people here are like putting in like, okay, here's an extra half-time staff person or new culverts
Yeah.
and making that, it's an increase, don't, you know.
We're trying to put in, at least for some of the staffing, for sure. But it's a hard budget season though, too. I mean, and harder in Bolton, I'm sure. But when we're coming out of, you know, basically having no unassigned funds to put towards the budget, we have these huge expenses. We're trying to figure out how do we balance our budget and not give people a huge increase. And let's not even talk about the schools, because that factors in huge. You know, they all look at us like, you went up 4%. Well,
It wasn't us.
have you seen the school? Like, so, like, we try to keep it down. So, but yes, we are trying to do what we can to put in some there. The infrastructure costs, I mean, luckily we've got some good reserves in highway, but we're using a lot of that right now to kind of get through the flood. So this time next year, hopefully we're paid back, we can start to look at some of those projects, but it's just gonna take a while. And I was on the phone with a prominent business owner in town today, but when are you gonna fix that pipe that's upstream from my property? I'm like, well, Dan, not really sure, but we'll try to do something with FEMA money. Oh, you're not doing anything. Okay.
Leanne?
How many of your basin towns have stormwater utility? Do you know?
Shelburne, Burlington has a utility. Colchester does too.
Burlington, South Burlington, Colchester,
Shelburne,
Winooski? No.
no.
Williston?
Well,
Essex?
Essex?
I don't know.
I think they're starting one of them.
yeah.
Essex Town, Essex
Yeah.
Township?
Yeah.
I think they're making one,
Yeah.
one of them is already
I think
one in
Yeah,
town.
one
Yeah, one of them.
One of the others, yeah. I don't,
Let's say two, and then I think Milton.
Milton, yeah,
So we've got 8.
yeah, out of the basin, but yeah, one of our towns, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think from my standpoint, you know, I look at it as, you know, because my job is like doing damage assessments and stuff like that, regularly after flood. I'm also in the process of trying to take the CFM exam, and I think it's helping the state hire and develop the staff that they need to kind of do this, and whether it's maybe the state, if anything else, has people that towns can hire temporarily to help do damage assessment or do things like that would be helpful, because again, it's not, they don't need more programs to have to do, they need money and bodies to kind of do it. So let's say if a town like Bolton, right, let's say if Richmond, for whatever reason, we didn't get hit, or Bolton or Huntington got creamed, you know, maybe they could call us, hire me or whatever temporarily to go down and do the damage assessments for them, because I at least know kind of what I'm doing, and also to help out with, I've been trying to take the CFM exam, which anybody who's probably taking it, it's not particularly fun exam to take, and I've taken a couple training courses, and I guess I'm frustrated with the fact that it doesn't seem to be a really great way to study for it. There's no like, if you sign up for this class, it's 3 months, and then you get your CFM at the end of it. It's, you show up for a week for training, and the guys, at least the one I went to, said, this isn't enough to actually take the CFM exam.
Yeah.
So I wasted a whole week of my work week down here expecting to be able to take the exam at the end of it.
Yeah.
And to not, I think if we're gonna need more of those, maybe the state or whoever looks at it, we're putting together a program for municipalities to hire staff to get CFMs and all that stuff.
Hold up for 1 second. Taylor, you want to talk a little bit about cost sharing, staff sharing, RPC services?
Maybe I'll walk there in a second. You know, I think Tyler's point's well taken, in terms of we need more bodies during flood events to do damage assessments in particular. I think back in Irene, I think the idea after Irene was that the RPCs would do more assistance with towns to do damage assessments, and the reality is that when a disaster happens, whenever that may happen, like in the middle of summer, some of our staff's on vacation, or we're busy doing our work too, and it's hard for us to get out, and that's not an excuse. We got to do better. I think we understand that, but that we could potentially play a bigger role there. Is what I'm really trying to get to. On the CFM thing too, did you go down to EMI, to the FEMA school down in Maryland?
I went to the one, I didn't do that one, I went to the one that they had at Montpelier like last want to say last year, 2023, when they had the 4-day training there.
If anyone wants to take the CFM exam, email me after. We'll send you down to FEMA school. They hold a couple of trainings like 3 or 4 times a year. It's absolutely free to go to. The town just has to pay to fly you down there. No, the town just has to pay for your meals. They'll fly you down. It's a 4-day course. I did it. I came out of it with CFM when I was working for Milton about 10 years ago. So if you're interested, let me know.
Yeah,
Shared services, I mean, I think Dan's just mentioning that, you know, we, a lot of RPCs have started to think about doing shared, or providing shared services to municipalities or groups of municipalities. Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission has a shared energy coordinator where 4 or 5 towns essentially pay for a staff person in the RPC to work with those towns on energy issues or climate issues. We're talking about a CCRPC doing some sort of like equity engagement,
Equity
you know,
policy
REI,
advisor.
what's that?
Equity policy advisor.
And that policy advisor would be doing equity engagement work with municipalities and advising them internally. That's something that may be happening next year. We could think about doing something similar around climate work or around resiliency work. That costs money, either from the municipalities or from the RPC. We have to figure out how to do that, but that's an option we can talk about too. And I think particularly about our rurals, you know, I think Huntington, Richmond, Bolton, you're all the same geography. You all have a lot of needs. We know you're going to have a lot of needs over the next couple decades. So I just want to put that on the table and talk about that if there is interest.
Yeah, because I think that's the issue is that having the administrative, I mean, Richmond's fairly lucky, we have a fairly robust municipal government infrastructure. We're a town like, and I don't know for a fact, but Bolton, or I know some towns where I grew up, like Belvedere, Waterville, you know, Hyde Park, like, or like Lowell, they don't even have zoning, like their town clerk is like a staff. And now you expect them to sit there and administer, you know, FEMA grants when they don't even have, you know, local zoning. They might have like a road guy, you know what I mean? So and I think that's part of it is recognizing that and maybe being like, if they could call, whether it's the state, and again, we hamstrung a little bit without having really robust county government. There isn't an obvious vehicle. I mean, they're kind of bootstrapping CCR, the RPCs to kind of do that, but again, it's not, you're also quasi-governmental. You're not really like,
You don't have taxation.
you don't really have any.
I'm not saying,
Don't worry, you're still bigger than Buell's Score.
I wanted to underline something, what was her name again?
Christine.
Christine. I want to underline something Christine said for the sake of the notes, I guess. Like the public education piece. I mean, I don't know how widespread it is, but it does feel like a lot of people do their thing and then expect government to come and save them. And we all have a role in that. Don't obstruct your own waterway, your own culvert, you know, adopt a grate, whatever it is. Where does that come in?
I mean,
We
that's,
do public education through our with our MS4 communities a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's just our urbans, so I don't know if we can build off
It's
that.
very liberal, yeah, but,
So we had a couple things.
yeah, go please, go.
Put in for needs while we're talking about it. The advanced assistance grant that we're applying for, we need the match.
Don't beat around the bush, girl.
Not going to. So everyone needs to plug this with their legislators or whatever, however that gets done, because we know, I mean, the last group were very fortunate to get their matches, and right now we don't know that we would get one. And it's a lot of money that we don't have for that grant. So it'd be great to get the grant, but if we can't pay the match, you know, where are we? And then I would just say, as far as staffing, what we've seen with the buyouts, and what we've been told is, oh, it won't cost your town anything with these programs. Well, we have a staff person now who we thought we were hiring to be an assistant to our administrator to do other projects, and she pretty much full-time now working on the buyouts, and we had not contemplated that. And so, I mean, it's not without cost to the towns
That's very
to
true.
administer that.
That's very true.
and you know, and I think just again, because municipalities kind of know what their needs are, and I think trying to get more of that money in bodies, I think, kind of where they're needed on the ground and kind of, and again, this is probably more of a legislative question, but, you know, as much as the legislature was kind of complaining to FEMA that we just need block grants, we just need the money now and we'll get it out, I think municipalities and localities need that as well. Obviously, there's risk in terms of making accountability and making sure the money's not being, you know, getting where it needs to go, but I think that Josh or some other administrators will probably benefit from the fact of knowing that, hey, here's an initial chunk of money that you can just spend it how you need to spend it. Like if you need to hire bodies, hire bodies. You need to buy a bunch of water for people, buy a bunch of water. You know what I mean? Kind of let the municipalities administer it how they need to, I think, and get it, on the ground kind of quickly. If that means you need to hire, if you could hire more construction crews, you have cash on hand to do that rather than sit there and wait for a program to maybe come back and reimburse you, but make sure you dot the i's, cross the t's and do this, but here you are, here's $250,000 or whatever it is. Do what you need to do, with the understanding is that there might not be more after this, so make sure you are spending it appropriately, but you know what your needs are, so.
Excuse me, how are we doing on time when we have to be back?
You have 15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay, we're doing pretty good then. Yeah, go ahead, and then Christine, and then, were you?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Big money, little money, and crazy idea. Big money, the easiest way to move around a lot of money in the state for localities is through the bond bank. And we're super fortunate to have pretty good bylaws for the revolving loan funds. If you could change one thing in law, it would be the bylaws on the revolving loan funds to enable resiliency type projects, get you 2% money. That's the easiest way to get you as $1 billion collectively, and move it on through. And you've got support for, you're fortifying your grand list, you're protecting your property values, these are smart investments in the future. I think the underwriting on it would be pretty good. So that's how we move our culvert projects faster. Small money thing, looking in my map in Shelburne, we've got cornfields right up to the edge of the pond that aren't doing very well for holding water back from Winooski. Right. So if that turned into swamp, Christine, your comment about, I can't build heavy stormwater infrastructure in the wetlands, but we can plant swamp trees. And swamp oaks and pawpaws are pretty cheap. And I think we know how to do forest regeneration in the state. So target some of that land and start doing that, maybe through our natural resources, like our conservation committees.
Yeah.
The best example of really savvy kind of heartfelt management of a swamp that I ever saw, like who loves the swamp the most, was the native tribe. And I saw a state program in Virginia, that'll be my last Virginia example, where they gave the swamp to the tribe. And it was ancestral land, they loved it, they took care of it, they're managing the land better, they're doing interpretation with it, and nobody's gonna preserve the ecological systems in that property better than the Chickahominy tribe. So maybe Vermont tribes have a role to play here.
Interesting, great. Christine? Hold on a second, Christine, and then back to everyone.
Yeah, no, I think I was just we were talking about resources, and the point I was gonna try to make is, this is, what we're talking about now is gonna take time, right? It's not we're talking about a lot of responses and how do we get through that, but it is a lot of identifying projects, working on them 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I hope we don't get caught up on projects and then realize we didn't build them big enough, but also labor resource, it's challenging when we have these situations happen because we do things like you said, or suggested, maybe, hiring out short term, I've got money, get somebody in here. That can really cause a lot of disruption in the actual labor force itself, because we end up stealing the same people from each other. And so it doesn't make sense, and it kind of becomes counterproductive, right? Because it just drives up the cost of living, and then you have staff that doesn't really know the old history and doesn't have that, the institutional knowledge, so it's not productive. But longer term and just working and continuing to fight at this, not in response to disasters, but getting funding in between it, getting opportunity to work on projects. I think we need to be more steady resources, more steady funding, so that we can continue to address this in between the storms.
Can I ask a follow-up on that real quick? I mean, I feel like in the state we have a lot of planning money, and then we have a lot of construction money, and we don't have a lot of design money. In order to get to construction, you need that design money. I want to hear from you guys, do you also feel that way?
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah, you can't start to estimate, you can't start to go after the money with the grant money unless you have a design. And then you can't get the design money, because you're talking anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 to a reasonable sized project. And
with Elaine and Overton.
So, I'm gonna ask for something selfish and then I'm gonna go back and offer something. During, again, 2023, what we started seeing is our river was going up faster the more water was coming down because Lake Champlain was getting higher and higher, so it was starting to, it takes less to flood it upstream, right?
Yeah.
And so, our utility manager told the story to Christine and Jan on the way up, but our utility manager said, who's responsible for letting out Lake Champlain? And there actually is an international commission that looked at that and produced a draft report, and the conclusion, I talked to one of the researchers that was a UVM, and she said, well, the problem is that the Richelieu River, which is where it drains into, is pretty populated to the bank, so it's in their interest to keep it all in Vermont as long as possible. I was like, okay, so what do we do then? What's the solution? And she said, we need wetlands upstream of Lake Champlain. I was like, okay, that makes sense. How much? And she says, it has to be the size of Lake Champlain. So that's what I want from everybody. And what I can offer is that even though we would love to have a grant, we have a very low grant list, one of the lowest in the county, and under state average, or at least under county average income. But I do not want to wait around for our treatment plant to get inundated. And so as soon as we can get the scoping ready, like I'm gonna pay for it out of reserves and then that grant money is available for somebody else. If we can get to it in time, that's how we're gonna do it, because we gotta get that done before next flooding season. I don't wanna sit through that again.
Quickly then Tyler, and I want to get to our last
Yeah,
prompt.
so I think, and I really like I said the last point was that, about how we're, fighting over staff and how, you could wind up trying to chase the same contractors around. I think this gets at a broader point municipalities have is there's workforce challenges for municipalities as well, hiring people.
Right.
Hiring people who have CFMs, hiring road crew guys, hiring stuff like that, and maybe municipalities and stuff could look at, looking at apprenticeship programs for municipal employees in terms of like, hey, this is what we need in terms of somebody who administers FEMA or flood, because it's kind of a niche thing that it's not necessarily, it really pertains more to municipalities. It's not something that you're gonna really see unless you take a really focused program, I think, at the college level. I'm trying to, I have an MPA and I'm trying to think of like a very, we didn't have, here's what you do with, FEMA programs, you don't have that.
Yeah,
Whereas if you could hire, people and put them in a pipeline where whether it's, let's say, even for smaller towns, like, let's say if Huntington or Bolton said, hey, we don't have a certified CFM, what if we had an apprenticeship program where we could hire somebody who does this and maybe does some zoning and figures that out, and then that person learns, goes and does it. Because again, I stumbled into my particular field just, as a zoning administrator. I didn't even know that was really even like a career thing, right?
We can't afford to pay people.
But that's the, but
So
there you
we
go.
can't, we can't compete with the private sector.
But that's the problem, you
Yeah.
could maybe pull.
I just want to be mindful of time,
Yeah.
trying to keep, I just got a good job here to move this along. So we've kind of heard of all our individual experiences, town to town. Just this last year, the last 10 minutes roughly we got, are there areas where you hope to, or you are already collaborating with other towns?
Point to me. Already collaborating, who knows? What do you have in mind?
Well, Adam, you said that you guys talked.
Well, I guess Adam and I talk. Yeah, so in that sense, yeah, so Adam and I talk with Brian over in Bolton often as well. And I think, and actually my assistant's been doing some work for Brian in Bolton to help out with some of the FEMA organization. So yeah, so in that sense, we've been collaborating to some degree with some staff and just some shared knowledge.
That's huge.
Yeah.
There's some kind of UVM-supported study underway for a regional stormwater authority, something or other.
That's-
Six or so
Yeah.
towns
That's
cooperating for that.
right, so I was gonna talk about there's already forms of regional collaboration going on to varying degrees. Good example is within the stormwater world, there's the 9 MS4s that give money to us at CCRPC, and then we pay for the marketing people and the outreach people about stormwater issues, just to consolidate it in one thing. So that's an example of a cost sharing. And UVM is indeed, Sea Grant folks, a fellow there, looking, both a fellow and a fellow, doing, are there other opportunities for further collaboration at the stormwater level, especially around issues around site inspection? Because there's a heavy load on all the towns, but especially MS4s to inspect construction sites and things like that. So that's a good example. But anybody, so you guys are obviously sharing information. Anybody got any big picture plans, like something with the neighboring town on like multiple culverts in a row all on one river that crosses town boundaries? Or anything? Okay.
Nothing just yet. I mean, we'll see what comes out of the study that we're doing,
Right.
because that could go up into Huntington or back into Bolton or Waterbury, depending on what the engineers say. So there could be.
Right, in theory, there'll be a lot of good data to share.
Yeah.
You guys do a study, then they do a study, and then also.
Yeah.
Any things that, like, if you could, like, wave a magic wand and do collaboration with the town? Like, I mean, you get the police sharing with some towns, public works, zoning staff, planning staff, grant writers, grant managers, because, we can't, you guys come to us, but we've got all these grants to manage and things, we.
Which, speaking of, if you got your UPWP solicitation right before Thanksgiving, you need help with grant writing next year, tell us as a part of your UPWP solicitation so we can reserve time to help you with grant writing in FY26.
Good point, yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
So we definitely need help, but this is back to staffing in that a lot of our positions, listing, zoning, administration, you guys help me out with others, that we don't have enough for a full-time person. And because we only need 20 hours a week or whatever, we're having trouble keeping people. Because we don't offer benefits, we don't, and it's like, so we need to collaborate with others that don't have full-time staff either to try to make this work as we're watching people walk out our doors.
Dory, on that, just so everyone knows, we were trying to set up a system with St. George and now Shelburne's gonna be real kind and help St. George with zoning administration services.
I'm not kind, they're paying for it.
They're paying for it, but Shelburne's gonna provide that service. But with Underhill, what we've decided is essentially Underhill is likely going to pay us, and we're gonna have a CCRPC staff person be the zoning administrator in Underhill.
They don't have anybody?
What's that?
Nothing.
They can't find anyone, they've been advertising for a year. And so 30 hours a week, and so we have maybe a possible collaboration with Z. I know he uses there and he's great.
Yeah.
But if that ever opens up again, like maybe
Yeah.
we've got some room there, and Bolton's turned over a lot. So when those things happen, let us know, and we want to do matchmaking if we can. Listers
Yep.
is another thing too we know about, but we
don't have any.
Yeah.
There's just left. And nobody wants to be a lister, I'll tell you. So we
Townwide
don't,
reappraisal's almost done.
so yeah, we don't know what we're doing. Yeah, we
But
don't,
it's
yeah.
not-
You guys tried to reach out to Nemrick at all? You can
Well, we have
contact
that,
them.
but we don't have an assessor model right now, so we would have to go through a whole process. So hire
Because
them.
there are listers.
Is that what you guys do?
Yeah, we just contract with Nemrick for assessing services. They did our whole townwide reappraisal. It was a bid process, but they won it easily.
Yeah.
And they do a great job, but.
We're looking at that.
Interesting.
a
Any
lot
other,
of more urban county towns are doing that.
any other ideas on collaboration or things like that going forward, or?
I mean, I think that's a good way, like finding towns that might be able to willing to like hire out staff and stuff like that. It's, again, it's hard because you wanna make sure your person's available to meet the needs for your town. So then you could I know Richmond and Huntington had a shared
Yeah, we do.
ZA at one point.
Yeah, and I think, so just to be clear, with Bolton, with Duncan, he's got, it's a separate agreement. He's supposed to be 30 hours with Richmond. He always goes more nowadays, but it's a separate, like, Bolton's paying him directly for his 5 hours a week, and he's working from home doing his thing. So it's not like we're coming through us, we just sort of kept it separate, kept it clean. But I think when we had the shared ZA with Huntington, I don't know if it ever really worked. When we had Suzanne, I don't know how she handled 20 hours in both towns. She must have been pulling her hair out, like she was like all over the place trying to manage, and then like.
2 sets of regs.
Yeah, and like the health insurance benefits got wonky, it was really weird, and then I know that when we had Keith doing that, I think it was like 10 hours in Huntington, and it just wasn't enough, and he just couldn't do it all.
Right.
So, but yeah, it makes me feel like we need like I don't know, I could start a business of like temp staffing for these towns where you have a bunch of people and you just, they go where
Well,
they're
that was, I
needed.
think, to my point earlier, is if you had like a, and again, a clearinghouse somewhere, so
Right.
obviously this is, you know, very, you know, broad strokes here, is like, okay, like whether it's CCR, this would be kind of idea, probably what a county government would have, is you would have people there, that you could have below people on the ground and then as needed, say, hey, we.
Yeah, I'm, you know, Tyler and Tim Taylor and Charlie and the board, it's all their decision, but it's, I mean, the one thing a CCRPC offers, or any RPC offers, is a stability, and then it's sort of, we just bill by task. So, I spent 5 hours on this town, here's your bill for whatever, you know.
We wanna make it simpler than that even, we don't wanna go by hour, but like, yeah.
Yeah, right, but, no, but there'll be people that say that, well, wait a minute, we didn't get, we pay for what we get, but there's ways to do it, and what we offer is that stability, and there might be times where we're slow on something, you're not enough zoning stuff, and we're like, oh, Dan needs help with stormwater stuff.
To be clear too, we're not trying to get more work.
No,
I'm not trying to sell you on anything,
we're
but
not
like,
empire
this is
builders.
one way, but I also wanna note that there's a countywide government study right now in the legislature.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's gonna come out of that, I think a report's due next November, December. We'll see what those findings say. There is another study about floodplain and river corridor administration, too, specifically taking NFIP floodplain administration away from the municipalities and just doing it at the state level.
Yeah.
So that may relieve the burden from municipalities. It also takes away your authority. So I
Yeah,
think
that
that's a
scares
double-edged
me,
sword.
especially if they're gonna have to try and administer,
Yeah.
look at what's allowed in each town's zoning regulations.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure
That,
on top of that.
that's a big piece, because, you know, we may have similar regulations from town to town, but they're all different. And
Yep, good point.
to have
Even the
one or
flood
two
regs are
people having to
Mhm.
stuff all of that in their heads,
Way different.
that's a lot.
Have you had an update on the countywide study? Have you heard anything from Eric? He's on it.
I know Charlie is following. I know that I'm going to get an update in a couple weeks, but I don't know anything particularly.
You're talking the legislative stuff? Yeah, I think they're still just taking in information, really, at this
I
point.
would be surprised, yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot.
I do wanna go back to like collaboration, right? And so collaboration and the emergency response, you know, as we sat around here, we talked about some communities had no damages, other communities had major damage. And I think that, you know, one of the challenges is really rebuilding your community, but sometimes those first 24 to 72 hours are the most critical. I mean, a crew that knows what they're doing can go in and really get a road reopened, get emergency access put back in place pretty quickly, pretty effectively. I think, and this is outside my wheelhouse of knowing how to get set up, but it would be nice if it didn't have to be revolving around money. It'd be nice if a community could say, hey, we didn't get hammered, we didn't get hit hard. If you need a crew, if you need some guys, we have them here, and keep it simple, right? The town continue to pay for the staff. I mean, let's say Williston sent 5 guys to Richmond, right? We shouldn't have to go through an extensive billing process. Look, we're not competitive. We're not, right? We're expensive. Towns are expensive, and
Did none
so,
of that happen?
I'm sorry?
Did none of that happen?
Some of that
Did
happens.
some of
How does that work anyway?
1 minute, okay.
Is
It's
it-
like if your road
We do
foreman
it.
in our town, you know,
I
our
mean, we
road.
do it, that's why we do the local emergency
Yeah,
management.
fire departments have mutual aid.
Yeah.
We
That's
tell,
more formal,
that's
yeah.
us telling the regional planning commission and then the state what resources we have.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, you know, we'll staff will activate, or sometimes the state tells us, but I'm not sure, like if somebody needed a road crew, how does that
We
work?
gotta wrap up here, but I'll just close with one thing I learned many, many years ago. I don't know if it's still true. If you are gonna share public works things, get a written agreement in place ahead of time, and then it's a reimbursable cost with FEMA, because you can say, oh, we paid this town for that, and eventually you'll get back your 75 from the federal government. But we just need to wrap up, and I'll go over the notes with Christine and report out. I just do wanna thank you for all you did here with this discussion, and just in closing, I'd ask that you remember Don Turner from Milton, passed away recently, and I've got to know him over the years, and just a great man. And the service is this Saturday at the Public Works facility named after him. I think it's noon or 2 o'clock this Saturday. 2 o'clock. So just think about that.
I think they're streaming it too.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I
good
saw
to
an
know.
announcement on LCTV.
So, send a note, send a card to the town or whatever, and I'll just think about him and all he did for the state and his town, so. All right. Thanks, everybody, appreciate it.
Thank you.